Hi guys, welcome back to the Graveyard Workshop. Tonight we're going to build a fixed eye LED eye kit that will work in pretty much any triaxial skull that uses a skull plate. I'm going to start out by showing you what parts are needed and a little bit on the tools, and then we'll get cracking to assemble this thing. Start out with the eyes. These are Triaxial Skull Labs standard sized eyes. I like the standard size eyes a little better than the oversized ones. Just a little more realistic in my mind, anyway, a little bit creepier. These are positive anode eyes. They have the LED built into them already. I also use the pigtails that Triaxial Skull Labs sells. It's pretty easy to assemble. Triaxial Skull Labs also provides a wiring diagram. It tells you how to set your servo controller. You're going to use it in relay mode, which will only provide on-off switching for the for the eyes. An optional item that I like to include in this is a cheapy, creepy servo controller. I have a couple of these things. They work very well. They provide dimming for all three colors, and you just plug them into your servo controller, and you can provide dimming through your servo controller software. Very, very nice. If you already have a set of eyes and you need the LEDs, I bought a packet of those online for about $5. This was a dozen. Again, they're positive anode LEDs. To extend the wiring out of the skull, I found some 4-conductor bell wire. This is actually from Radio Shack. Works very well. We'll end up soldering these connections together in a little while. You also need, this is kind of important, this is an 11/32 inch copper tube, brass tube. The 11/32 inch tube actually fits the eye very, very well. That's why I chose that size. And you're going to need a piece of 3/8 inch thick plexiglass. When I bought this, it was 12 by 12. I think I paid about, I don't know, $9 or $10 for it. And then a couple of optional items. If you don't want to use a Twisties pigtail, you could go online and order some female, these are called DuPont connectors. These are the single DuPont connectors. They look just like this. They take about 10 days to get here, though, because the only place that seems to sell them is China. I think I paid about $5 maybe for the connectors and the cases for the connectors. So, one last thing you're going to need is a couple of panhead screws. These are just 3/4 inch screws that you'll use to fasten the connector to the plate, to your skull plate. And then you're going to need a little bit of glue to glue all of this together. Some cyanacrylate glue, which I don't have right here at my table. That's about it. Okay, let's talk about the tools that you're going to need to complete this eye kit. First and foremost is a Dremel tool and a cutting bit. You're going to be cutting a lot of material out of these skulls. It's messy. It's not particularly difficult. It just makes a pretty big mess. So be sure and do it in your garage, and don't do it anywhere where you don't want plastic all over the place. I use a number 115 cutting bit. It is a very coarse wheel with a lot of chop space on it. Use this instead of, don't use one of the fuzzy cutting bits because they'll clog up with the plastic. You're going to need an 11/32 inch drill bit to drill holes in your plexiglass to accommodate your brass tube. You're going to need a, what is this? This is a 9/64 inch drill bit to drill into the edge of your plexiglass. This piece of plexiglass is going to mount up against your skull plate with the eyes coming through the front. So you're going to end up drilling holes straight down into the edge of this plate. You probably are going to need a slightly larger drill bit to actually drill a couple of holes into the top of your skull plate. This one I think is a 3/16 inch bit. You can go a little bit larger, and you may end up having to cut a slot or cut a larger hole in order to adjust the way that the eye plate attaches to the skull plate. You're going to need a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver to screw the screws into the top of the skull plate. I use a speed square to measure off and mark off my plexiglass. You're going to need a regular ruler or very accurate tape measure to measure your bracket. I use some graph paper to do my drawings with. Also use a red Sharpie. Shows up pretty well on this plexiglass. Plexiglass has got protective plastic on both sides that you can write on it with ink or with a Sharpie and then just peel it off when you're done. You're also going to need a set of wire strippers, and depending on how you're going to connect up the eyes, you're probably going to need either a soldering iron and some solder, or some wire nuts, or at least some electrical tape, depending on your preference. I believe that's oh, you're going to need a drill and a saw. I happen to have a drill press. You can use a hand drill to drill your holes. It's not particularly difficult. You just have to be very careful and make sure that they're precise. The holes that you want to drill with this 11/32 inch bit, this piece of tubing is going to fit into the hole, and it's very, very snug. So you can slide it back and forth a little bit to adjust how far the eye is sticking out of the skull, but you just need to make sure that you do that very precisely so that it doesn't wobble. And you're going to need a saw. I happen to have a band saw, but you can make the cuts in this plastic with pretty much any kind of saw, a coping saw or a hack saw or a regular hand saw, anything with a fine tooth to it. If you use those kinds of saws, you may need a clamp as well. And that, I believe, is all we're going to need in the terms of tools.